He's a very, very accomplished anthropologist and ethnographer, and it's just wonderful to be able to introduce him to you now. Doug.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So keep an eye on my time. So good evening, and thanks very much for coming along to the Martial Arts Studies conference and to my talk. And today I'm going to talk about efficacy and entertainment in martial arts studies, an anthropological perspective. I am an anthropologist, so I guess that's why it has to be an anthropological perspective. So for me, for my purposes, I like to talk about martial anthropology, and really it's just anthropology with the martial arts in. I guess to have a play on words with Tim Ingold, which would be anthropology is philosophy with the people in. Yeah, me and Ingold have, I have some issues with his work. I think he's the most brilliant anthropologist, contemporary anthropologist who's writing, and the most engaged as well. But I just don't agree with some of his work, and especially the work on agency and stuff. And I'm going to talk a bit about that as we go along. But first I want to outline some of this sort of journey into a martial anthropology, which is also a martial arts studies. It can be more than one thing simultaneously. And my influence was mostly from Philip Cirilli, who was my external examiner for my PhD, which I did at the National University of Singapore, turning down a place at the London School of Economics to go there, because I wanted to be in the field. I wanted to carry on learning Silat. I wanted to learn Malay language, and I ended up living there for 9 years. And it was Philip's idea of this performance ethnography, which is where you learn a martial art, you join in and learn a martial art from the ground up, and then you write about that. That's what I wanted to do. And I read his When the Body Becomes All Eyes. I read the whole book, and I actually was quite obsessive with that book at the outset of my PhD, because I went through every single reference to every chapter and every article and read everything. So that was how I set up my study on Silat, which is the Malay martial art. And this was kind of before Luc Wacquant had published his work on carnal sociology and carnal ethnography. And I didn't really become familiar with his work until down the road a bit, actually after martial arts studies, the martial arts as embodied knowledge, which we didn't want to call it that. That was the publishers who titled it that. But the martial arts as embodied knowledge had already kind of been set up and written by the time I'd come across and was really starting to read Wacquant's work. So I pay a bit more attention to that now, I guess. But this thing, martial arts studies, really is John takes the credit for writing about martial arts studies, really. I was a PhD student, and under Brian Turner, who gave me a contract for my book, Shadows of the Prophet, and they put me under John to sort of learn the ropes of how to publish. I ended up doing more of the work than he did, so that's why my name went on there first, but it was him that pressed for this martial arts studies. For me, I was quite content with martial anthropology. But I've kind of like moved on, you know, sort of after a decade, you pick up other stuff, and I guess I've relaxed to some extent especially about disciplinary boundaries and about how I approach my work now. Like, I'm just as likely to publish in a blog as I am an article nowadays, you know. And I've kind of picked up this thing of a nomadological perspective, which is a concept that I've taken from Deleuze and Guattari. Their book Capitalism and Schizophrenia is really influential to me, and that's why it's the first thing that I reference in my book Shadows of the Prophet, because I just think that was really groundbreaking work for my part. And this idea of nomadology, I really like it, and I think it can work in sort of three ways. It can work in terms of an ontology, what you're studying. So you could be studying whatever martial art it could be, Silat or Capoeira, or you know, there's so many. In my case, I've done Charles Family Praying Mantis. I also looked at Hong Sang Chole Phut in Singapore. I learned Jing Wu in Singapore, which was comprised of 4 different arts, Eagle Claw, Shaolin, Tai Chi, and Northern Praying Mantis, Chat Sing Tang Lang. So I did that as well, and I did Bagwazhang in Singapore as well, because I was there for 9 years, and as well as about 11 or 12 styles of Silat. So this idea of nomadology is really like not being tied down to any one style. Like right now I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Guam because it's just Guam, it's this place to do it. But so in some way, in terms of ontology, it's not being tied down to style, but it's also not being tied down to any particular way of looking at a style as well. I'm perfectly aware that some of you are writing about literature, some of you are looking at film, some of you are looking at theatre. So we can also look at, I guess, representations as well, can be part of that nomadological ontology for martial arts studies. And then just to sort of go towards epistemology, I think also we can be epistemologically kind of nomads as well. Like just, and this is really, all of this is really drawing from Bruce Lee's idea of absorb what is useful, you know? If it's useful, just use it, you know? So I think in terms of the epistemology as well, this nomadological perspective applies, and even in terms of the methodology too. So how are you going to work from this? For me, this seems to just tie it up all together, which otherwise just seems like a load of loose ends. But yeah. So I've got some prior form in more ways than one, I guess. And the Silat Malayu study that I did, Shadows of the Prophet, it was really tricky. They were the Naqshbandi Sufi Tariqat, which is a Sufi order of mystics, and they were the mystics for the royal families of Southeast Asia. So for my case, just coming from a working class builders background, it was really like kind of working, interviewing up, doing ethnography up, all these millionaire people. And I learned Silat in England first from a bodyguard, or Ulu Balang, for Raja Ashman, who's unfortunately passed away just a couple of years ago. And I remember asking him if I could have permission to do this study, and he gave me permission to do it. And he said the most important thing actually in this, all of this, is respect. And it was quite tricky to write Shadows of the Prophet, because on the one side, clearly what in the West would be defined as a cult. There's an Islamic deviationist cult, and they would be defined pretty much as a cult in Malaysia too, and within Southeast Asia, if they weren't so powerful, and if they weren't the tariqat, the order of the royal family, you know, because nobody can call them a cult because they're just too powerful to get called that. They can just do what they want. So it ended up being a kind of double study. It was a study of, on the one side, Silat as a martial art, but it was also a study of the Haqqani. And I kind of play with that theme right the way through the book, as it's broken up into these different sections of doubles and echoes and shadows and reflections. And so I constantly wanted to reflect back and to look at the kind of echoes of tradition in modernity, and modernity reinventing tradition, for example, that Hobsbawm thing, but also to look at the classical traditional sociology and anthropology, which was kind of obsessed with this idea of shadows. And if you read early Tyler, or if you read Herbert Spencer, there's all kinds of material on how native people supposedly lived in this kind of dream sort of shadow world, and that was real to them as well. So it was kind of like, to me, that's 100 years on. Of course, nobody in anthropology professes that or believes that, but at the same time, it was there in anthropology, and it was an understanding that they took to the world. And one thing, I guess, with anthropology, salvage anthropology is not popular anymore. You know, the idea of going around and salvaging things from different cultures. But I think salvage as a concept could actually be applied to anthropology, and we can still salvage things that are useful from the earlier anthropologists. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do with this shadows, reflections, doubles, and echoes. So that was the Shadows of the Prophet. And that took me a decade to do. And at the end of it, I got kind of fed up. I got fed up. There was too many arguments. There was too many fights between the group and the Guru Silat, and there was just way too much sorcery. And it started to give me the creeps, to be honest. And so I was living in Singapore. I finished my PhD in 2005, effectively written it up, had to wait a year and a half for the bureaucrats to mark it and deal with it. Some people in bullshit jobs, as Graeber would call them. And then, so one day I saw this little old guy in the park, and he was jumping around, and he was in his 70s, but he was so fit, and he was using all these weapons and stuff. And I thought, I'd like to be like that when I'm old. That looks great. And so what I did was I embarked on another ethnographic study for 30 months. And I I trained with this guy for 30 months, usually 5 hours a day, every day. So I put in about 35 hours a week training, and then I put in about maybe 2 hours a day writing on top of that, writing the field notes, plus socializing with them and stuff like that. So it becomes like, it's really full time, it's full on. You end up working 60, 70 hours a week on average. It's just normal, yeah. But before I did any of this, and I guess to contextualize it, I'd done Southern Praying Mantis. So I was a martial artist who became an anthropologist. I wasn't an anthropologist who became a martial artist. I already had my black belt down in Southern Praying Mantis. I trained in that style. I used to train 5 hours a day. I did that for 8 years. You know, the dole was pretty useful in England back in the 80s. You know, and yeah, and so I wanted to write something about that, and that came out a couple of years ago, Becoming Animal, in the Chinese martial arts, and it came out in a Berg book, and that really relates to the story of Southern Praying Mantis as I see it. And I went back to relearn this whole style in Hong Kong. Although I had a black belt in it from England, I went back to relearn it in Hong Kong, and I've been going to Hong Kong every year. I go for a few weeks at a time and just relearn it, and it's the way I've learnt it is really different. So this is just, you know, giving some form. And then methods. For my work, I use a lot of methods. I'm really influenced by visual anthropology, like ideas about filming and reflexivity and photography, of course with participant observation and generating field notes and in-depth interviews. And for those of you who are just sort of thinking about embarking on a study like this, or we've already done it, I've done, I guess, in terms of ethnographies now, I'm on my 5th one. But by the time I got to my 3rd one, I realized, oh, really, you should show, not tell, when you write your notes. You know, and it gets easier, honestly. As you do more ethnographies, it does get easier. And it got to a point where I started to write the field notes as almost like a finished book, like it was done. There's nothing more that you just have to add to it. Yeah. So you get to a point where you can just get it done. And of course, case studies, life histories, anthropology of experience comes in. And I've done work in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, China, Hong Kong, Yap, and Guam. So this is, you know, really, I'm really interested in this idea of a community-based collaborative research. And I take this really seriously. I work with the Jingwu Athletic Association. I'm a member of them in Malaysia. And the way Jingwu are, they see themselves as actually investigating martial arts. So I think they're a fascinating organization. On the one side here, we have Yongfeng, and he acted as my translator to some degree, because sometimes it was just too difficult because of the so many different dialects. You know, I was dealing with Hakka, dealing with Hokkien, dealing with Teochew. It's just got too complicated. I mean, basically, I could speak to people in Chinese and I could speak to them in Malay, you know, good enough for like the coffee shop and just general interaction. But in terms of like really specialist definitions of terms, I needed help, of course. So Yongfeng was the person who helped me. And this other guy here is Akin, and he's a Southern Praying Mantis master practitioner who's now kind of works in traditional Chinese medicine. And they're looking at that a now defunct Journal of Asian Martial Arts, sadly. And they're looking at an old article on Southern Mantis, and they're trying to work out the translation of Chu and Chow. And is Chow different from Chu? Is Chu different from Chow? Was it to do with the move from China to Hong Kong? Or was it a mistranslation of Hakkanese into Cantonese? So it gets really quite tricky. Once it moves from Hakka to Cantonese and then it moves into English, then a lot of things get misplaced, you know, along the way. And there's a lot of argument about that. So this is one of the things that I just literally got a grant just to sort that particular thing out. That's what I wanted to do. Right now, my current projects are, if you're going to be a writer and you're serious about it, you've got to be finishing something, you've got to be in the middle of something, and you've got to be starting something. So the thing I'm starting is I'm thinking about Yap and Yapese stick dance, which is, there was a Yapese martial art called Buang, or Bung. Yap is in Micronesia, which is in the Pacific. And I'm quite interested in that, and I've gone to have a look at that in Yap. So I'm thinking about doing something on that next. And currently I'm working on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Guam. I'm looking at issues of homicide, habitus, and police and criminals. and we'll talk about this a bit more in the talk. And I'm also looking at Singapore Kuntao, or Chole Phut, and this is a study on secret societies, false connections, captivation and apparatus of capture. And that's almost done. I was going to publish it really soon actually, but I held off on that one because Lee Kuan Yew just died, and I just thought it wouldn't be very polite to be talking about that right now, and you'll see why when it comes out. But just to show you a map, where Guam is. Guam's just here, and this is Yap over here, and you can see it takes 4.5 hours to get to Seoul, and maybe 4 hours to get to Hong Kong. So it's like 2,100 miles to get to Seoul from here, and that's where I work now. And I've been there for the last 8 years. I was in Singapore for 9 years before that. But today, one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I don't want to get too bogged down in this because it gets really technical, but it's the infinity loop model, and it comes from Schechner's work, Richard Schechner, and he did this with Victor Turner, and it was very much the idea of the anthropology of performance coming together with performance studies as a new discipline created from Schechner theatre on the one side, and on the other side Victor Turner anthropology, and they came up with this idea about how social drama, if you like, could feed back into theatre, and how theatre itself could feed back into, if you like, real life. So there are many ways to explain this, and I'm going to look at it a bit in a minute with the Silat example. Now, just to get some basic definitions down, efficacy is to get something done. Effectiveness, if you like. Entertainment is to give pleasure to an audience. Now, you probably could pick these definitions apart, but they seem to be good enough for my purposes here. Basically, every performance has aspects of efficacy and entertainment. They have both. All right. But my question was, what happens if efficacy and entertainment become confused? What happens if you mix up what's basically entertainment with what's basically efficacy? So that was my question, and it leads to this idea of for me, it was a problem that I've been trying to look at, which is this notion of false connections. And before I did a PhD in anthropology, I was doing a PhD in psychoanalysis at Middlesex University. So I was just about to embark on my PhD, and I spent 2 years preparing for it, and then I didn't get funded, so I went to Singapore instead, and I worked there for 3 years, and I got funded to do anthropology instead. So basically I jumped ship from psychoanalysis. But there are some really interesting concepts from psychoanalysis that I still would like to work with. And one of them is this idea of false connections, which was when somebody's under hypnosis, and they're given an instruction, for example, that there's a table in the middle of an empty room. Right? There's a huge table in the middle of this empty room, and then they're woken up out of the hypnosis, and then they're asked to cross the room to go and get something. And what they do is they skirt all the way around the edge of the room, they get something, and then they come back again. And then the hypnotizer says to them, well, why did you go around the edge of the room? And they say, well, I don't know, it's cold, and I wanted to be near the radiator, so I could stay warm, or something like that. So they basically be like a cross wire, where they come up with some reason that wasn't the real reason, if you like. They come up with some reason, this false connection, that sort of displaced the real reason for what they were doing. So I was quite fascinated with this idea of false connections, about how people could kind of make these kind of cognitive mistakes, if you like. And I wanted to look at this efficacy in entertainment. Once these ideas, or variables, if you want, once they become confounded, then maybe that leads to this idea of some kind of false connection. And you'll see in a minute what I'm going to talk about with that. But just to get through a bit more of the theory, another way to talk about this in anthropology would be to talk about captivation. And this comes from Alfred Gell's book on art and agency. And he talks about entrapment, and how agency could be entrapped, or how an object or an artwork could exert some kind of agency to ensnare the viewer in a cognitive trap. And I've written about this in the healing arts of the Malay mystic, about how paintings supposedly could spring into life to defend people when they come under some kind of spiritual attack. And to me, to my mind, this is very much like, reminds me of Hegel and this idea of like kind of embodiment of spirit. And so I'm kind of suspicious about the term embodiment. I really didn't want the book to be called Martial Arts as Embodied Knowledge. It just ended up like that. But I'm really suspicious of embodiment, because what's being embodied? Is it some kind of spirit? And then what do we mean by spirit? You know, it just causes more problems than it really solves. And so I'm wondering if embodiment and agency are kind of like emic attributions, right? Rather than kind of like, it's if you like, it's an emic attribution. It's something that's come from the field, from how people are regarding, they're regarding perhaps agency as being embodied in a thing, and then that's being developed into some kind of grounded theory, and that's leading to some kind of academic false connection. I don't know if does that make any sense? Yeah? So I'm thinking there's false connections. I'm not just saying that people can have false connections out there. I'm saying these academics can have these false connections as well. And that one of the false connections could be this idea of embodiment, and the other false connection could be the idea of agency. Now, this is Tim Ingold, because Tim Ingold is attacking agency and he's attacking embodiment. He says that agency is magical mind dust and we should just forget about it. It's just rubbish, especially the idea that agency could be embodied in a thing. You know, what we need is not a theory of things, we need a theory of life, right? And the same idea of embodiment, the idea that you've got some sort of something spiritually encapsulated within you, is also nonsensical, because basically we're active within the world, creating and making the world with our every move and word and the things that we're doing and the way that we're connected together. So he really dismisses this kind of agency and embodiment, and I find that quite fascinating, because on the one side of me I'm really tempted to kind of agree with him, but on the other side, you know, I think the only people who kind of really can think that agency doesn't exist and really have such a cynical idea about agency is people who've never had it stripped from them. If you've had your agency stripped from you, then you know all about it, really. If you've been in a total institution, like in a prison or a mental hospital or something like that, then you're going to start thinking, actually, agency is real and structure is real too. And so I think with the idea of an anthropology of performance, on the one side, yes, we can draw from Turner and we can draw from Richard Schechner, but also I think it's still important to maintain that root with Goffman, with Irving Goffman and his ideas. So this is where I'm going with that. This is Ung Sifu, Ung Kim Han. He is the guy I spent 30 months with training in Singapore, and mostly with this kind of Jingwu is theatre. They're training opera performers. It's not effective in terms of being a martial art. It's problematic. There was one of the people who trained with him for many years, and I came out of Southern Prayer Mantis, and Southern Prayer Mantis, if nothing else, they teach you how to fight. And it was in the East End of London where I learned how to do this, you know. And one of his students challenged me outside a community club, and he got really, really rough. And I wasn't going to put up with it, so I just flattened him. I did this technique called the face, where you just grab their face and smash them into the floor. And I flattened him, this guy. And then my friend Yong Fong comes up to me and goes, "Oh, no, you can't do that, you can't do that." And I said, "Why not? He attacked me." And he said, No, you made him lose face. And I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you made him lose face." So, okay. So this was, if you like, the martial arts being practiced for theatre, it's for entertainment. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have some kind of efficacy, it does. They have like these big wooden balls about this big. And for the life of me, I tried getting on this ball and running around on it, but I couldn't do it. Yeah. But then you see these kids, the Chinese kids, they jump on these balls and they run around on this ball, and the ball wheels around. It's just way better than skateboarding. Yeah. But this is like entertainment. He would tell me himself, this is not about fighting. This is about staying fit. It's about getting old gracefully. It's about being able to do a jumping spinning kick when you're in your 60s. You know? On the other hand, this man here, this Sifu Lee Tin Loy in Hong Kong, he was a former policeman who's retired. For Lee Tin Loy, it's all about efficacy. It's about being able to kill with your fingertips. This guy is incredibly powerful. The power that he's developed through his training. He's a very small person, but he's got this strange kind of abilities and powers. His teacher also had some very strange attributes, like his neck would just go straight down and he could knock on his neck and it sounded like plastic. You can't pull any skin off his hand, off his arms. like just the incredible bodily transformations that take place through this particular set of training. So these guys would argue there's very little theatre in what they're doing, that it's just totally practical. And they'd get really upset if you told them it was anything to do with entertainment. And then this is Yapese stick dance, which I was privileged to go and see in Yap, in Micronesia. And when I was there, reading all the literature on Bung, it says that it disappeared in the 1940s, that it's gone. That Bung doesn't exist. There's no Bung, no, you can't find it, you can't see it. And so I went and stayed in the Falu, which is the men's house, for 3 days. I took a few bottles of whiskey with me because the guys like to drink. And we sat in this Falu, and this little old man came into the Falu, and he'd had a stroke, so he said he couldn't drink very much, but he polished off an entire bottle of whiskey. And he sat there, and we were just talking, and he he asked me what I was interested in, and I said I was interested in Bung, and he said, really? And he said, well, it doesn't exist, you know, it's gone. That everybody knew it died, you know. And I said, well, I don't believe you. And he said, well, why don't you believe me? And I said, well, because I saw the Yapese stick dance, and to me it's bloody obvious, it's right there. I mean, look at the definition on this guy's back. Look at the size of these poles. This is heavy. This is serious training, men and women. Yeah? You slip with this stick, you're going to break your fingers. It's not easy. And there's many different dances for many different villages. And it's entertaining. It's very entertaining. And of course, but it's also, the efficacy's been hidden inside the entertainment, you know. So this is what they've done. And it's quite fascinating. So anyway, I was sitting in this men's house with this guy, and he's drinking all this whiskey, and I'm having a couple of beers. And then I said, well, I saw some of the movements. And I said, I know you have the movements because I'm a martial artist, so I know you can do this. For example, and he said, yes, you can do this. But he said to me, but can you do this? And I said, yeah, I can do this. And then we went through 100 different movements, one after the other, just pattern movements. And so he just showed me this martial art actually does exist. It's just that they just hide it. They don't want to talk about it. It's really quite interesting. So I'm wondering whether to write about this or not, actually. Maybe you guys can tell me what you think. So anyway, so this study I did before, Seni Salahak Malayu, it had all this stuff about breaking the ego. It was a Muslim cult. So the idea of breaking the ego is that you've really got to conquer the animal within, and you've got to overcome yourself. Okay? And the way they would do that was with a 40-day seclusion. It's normally in Islam, it's done as an individual thing called a khalwa. But the way they did it was collective. So they would take a group of people and they would isolate them for 40 days. And you would live according to the rules of the camp. And there was all this kind of verbal mortification. It was brutal. The people were treated brutally. Like it was like Bolshoi ballet training or something like that. And but the thing is, there was this kind of misdirection that was mixed in as well. And I'm wondering if this was a kind of psycho-callousing. So, you know, this idea of callousing is quite interesting that I've been reading about recently. So here what we see is ritual ordeals on the one side, which is kind of efficacy for Shakna, and on the other side, theatre training, which is entertainment, and how these two are intertwined again within a martial art. This is a picture of the camp. This is the Guru Silat here with the glasses on, and then the guy sitting down on the floor, squat with his cross-legged, and also with shades on. He's Sadiq. So you hear the Guru Silat. He's eating lamb soup because it was a favourite of the Prophet. So you can no good being a vegetarian there. So he says, the Guru Silat says to him, eat slowly. Eat slowly. Chew your food. There. Why did you drop it down yourself? Don't touch the food until you swallowed what is in your mouth. This is the kind of thing. So just constantly picking on people, every last little thing, the way you eat, down to every last aspect of your behaviour is going to be criticised. That's the mortification. But the misdirection part of it is the Guru Silat criticising you, or is the Guru Silat criticising somebody else through you? Right? Because their ego is not big enough to take it. So therefore, they criticise somebody else. They're criticising you to criticise somebody else through you. So this idea of misdirection. So nobody knew who the hell was getting criticised. And nobody knew who he was really talking to. Is he talking to me? No, of course he's not talking to me. He's not telling me off because he's telling somebody else off through me. So it was like a hall of mirrors, hence reflections and echoes and doubles and all this kind of stuff. So it ended up going to this theatre, and they ran a theatre play in England. And the Guru Silat said they're not going to have any English students that are going to be part of this. We are only going to use students from Malaysia. So he went to Malaysia, set up this theatre training thing, and brought these Malay people back to England to run a show called Silat Dance of the Warriors. And it's a 1-hour show. And in the show, what happens is people run around with machetes, clash, 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 clash. This constant martial arts battle goes on to show Silat, to display it. And at the end of it, the Guru Silat sits, and he sits on this big purple cushion like the prince, and he has the 2 warring factions come up to him, and it's healed. And so my rendition of this was that it's a kind of wish fulfillment. It's a wish fulfillment of breaking all these egos, of breaking all these students, of having all the students leave and then having new students come in, and then they all get broken in their process, this ego breaking thing. He keeps breaking all his students. So this was a kind of wish fulfillment. So this is how I use the infinity loop model in my work, yeah, with efficacy and entertainment, right? And here, one of the things they do is they dip their hands into boiling oil. I've done this 4 times myself. This time was really hot. This was in Malacca. And these girls put their hands in that oil. And I came up with this idea of acculturation from this. And acculturation is defined as the attribution of sacred or mystical power to secret or esoteric skills. Yeah, it's a bit like fishing. You know, if you know the water and you know what time the fish come out, and you know the tide and you know the reef, then you can say where the fish are going to be and what time. But it seems magical to anybody who doesn't, know how to do this, right? And often it is set up as magic, but what it really is, it's a set of esoteric skills. And so what I'm talking about as acculturation is occult attribution, where esoteric skills are framed as magic. And so theatre for some might be framed as ritual for others, and vice versa. And one woman's black magic may be another's religiosity. So this also links into this idea of this infinity loop model, where you've got sacred and mystical power on the one side and esoteric skills on the other, and it's a way of hiding or revealing, which is kind of integral, I think, to an understanding of martial arts. Okay, so that was the first study. So the second study, I'm just going to talk about 3. The second one is the Singapore Kun Tao. Kun Tao is a Hokkien word for head fist, loosely, and Hong Sing Chole Phut is a group in Singapore's red light district in Geylang. They have 14 streets that's just prostitution legalized in Singapore. And it's kind of a long arm swinging training method, where they have all this like really huge swinging of the arms. But it uses a lot of the leopard insignia. They have leopard trousers, they have leopard fists that they use. And somehow they're definitely a secret society. They're a famous secret society. Another word for secret society, of course, is triad. Somebody told me this is a great style if you need, if you're going to go to prison, this is the style you want to know, because you can learn this style in 3 months. No need to go and learn for 20 years Tai Chi, forget about it. You could learn this for 3 months and you can kill people with your fist. So this was the mentality that they had for this Singapore Kun Tao. And of course, the long arm swinging just got totally thrown out of the window. That was kind of the entertainment part of it. But the efficacy was really just this strike with the leopard fist. And I think it's really kind of problematic how the martial arts changed, because a lot of the traditional method of training the art, like for example, they would take 2 stools like this, here and here. They would place their fingers on the stool and then really wide, and then they would do these press-ups on this stool with the whole body going down through it. But the teacher said to me, nobody does this anymore. And I said, why not? And he says, it's too much like hard work. Nobody wants to do this anymore. So they don't train, the method is kind of lost, sadly. This is Chia Sifu when he's young. Very precise, brilliant footwork. This was a video that I was going to show you, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. And he said to me one time, do you know how to dance? And do you know how to dance the cha-cha-cha? And it was really amazing, because it was this cha-cha-cha, and he would just use this step, and he would turn sideways and then pop, and he was really, really good at this precision movement. He was really lethal, this guy. And the thing about Chole foot that I thought was really interesting was this withholding and revealing. Like he would teach you another step and another form, but they would withhold the meaning behind it, or they wouldn't show you the application, or they wouldn't show you the next form until you attained a certain stage. So this is part of the learning in Kung Fu. And there's a kind of waist twisting with doubling the maneuvers. Like, you know, I always teach my students actually that this really simple maneuver is really effective because you've got an elbow, a back foot, you've got 4 blows in just turning your waist. So he'd gone beyond kind of this slavish reproduction of forms himself, and he created basically his own style of what is now recognized as Chole foot. But, you know, for me, my part, I really wanted to look at this idea of false connections with this, because the meanings of the movement was one of the movements that he showed me this technique. Okay, I've been doing martial arts for 40 years. Okay, so I've seen a lot of stuff over my time. And this guy, he showed me one of the techniques, and he showed this very fancy kicking application to it. And I said, no, that's not what it's for. And I showed him what it's for. And what it's actually for, this technique is to knee somebody in the stomach and then grab them as they're coming down and smash their head on the floor. That's actually what it's for. And when I showed him the technique, I could see his eyes widened, and he looked at me like semi-furious and semi-kind of pleased. Hard to tell, it's hard to read the look, you know. To me, there's really obvious application of that move. And then if you cross-train, you can see moves from outside. But in his style, traitors are outcast. So the issue became really like, why is this thing sort of dressed up in a fake application? Why are they teaching this move with the wrong application when the real application is so good? And yet they've hidden it. And they've hidden it so well that even they've forgotten it. You know? So this is captivation. It's being captured in this logic of something that's you know, I don't want to say fake, but it's being captured in this logic of something that's not what the application of the technique really is, I think. You know, in terms of efficacy. Great for entertainment, but in terms of efficacy, you know, it's got to be Occam's razor. Occam's razor, you know. The simplest explanation is going to be the one, you know. So this is what I apply to it. And to me, in Singapore, this whole idea of captivation ultimately leads to the whole logic of the state in Singapore. Like the Singaporeans really, they like the state, you know. They like Lee Kuan Yew, and you see all the people out crying, pouring of crying, and people getting upset with Lee Kuan Yew dying. Okay, you know, it's like there was 1 or 2 people who got upset and did some stuff on YouTube and ended up getting jailed. But, you know, it's like really it's the mass majority of Singaporeans supported the state, and they seem to support Lee Kuan Yew. So this idea of captivation then I think is really interesting. You know, how people can sort of be suckers for the state. This is the Xing Yi performance in Singapore for the lion dance. Okay, so the final stage here, thanks for bearing with me, is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I live on Guam, and you know, when in Rome, you know, no point teaching them Southern Praying Mantis in Guam. Nobody's interested. One, it's Chinese, and you know, Chinese stuff on Guam, they're not interested. They're interested in Japanese things for sure, but Chinese, no, sorry, nobody wants to know. So it's just wrong place for the kind of martial art. That's you know, I tried teaching Southern Praying Mantis there, just nobody seemed interested. I had a few people who learnt for a while, and then Southern Praying Mantis, you really got to eat bitter a lot, you know. You've got to deal with loads of bruises, and it's hardcore. And people come in, maybe they train a year, 6 months, and then they go. So for me, it's like a kind of a waste of time to teach people like that. I don't like that. Either they're in or they're not in, you know. But with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I find it quite ironic that it's defined as the gentle way, you know, Jiu-Jitsu. And it's a martial art that eschews striking, kicking, and punching. So they get really upset with me sometimes because, you know, rolling around on the floor, and suddenly I'll just fire a volley of kicks at them, and they'll be like, oh no, you're not allowed to do that. I'm like, sorry. So I really try to sort of phenomenologically bracket off other martial arts and keep them away when I'm doing a field work. I've been learning this now for about 8 months. And it was a steep learning curve. It's totally different. Instead of kicking, punching, and striking, you seize, pull, drag the opponent to the floor. You attain a dominant position. You have to pass the guard. And there are various different guards that you've got. And there's the mount, which is famous. I think everybody knows what the mount is. There's also a side version of it. There's the north-south version of it, which is also called the tea bag. Somebody once told me that I was homophobic for mentioning the tea bag in a paper on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think it's quite ridiculous. You can't be homophobic and do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I just don't think it's going to happen. You know? It's just not going to happen. You know, because basically you're just rolling around on the floor on top of each other. You know, what do you want? You know. So, and most of the submissions are done through arm bars, and they're done through choke holds. I've got a really busted right arm from doing this training, actually. And I call it the 671 field site. Guam 671, because it's the name of the road. It's a US territory, so it's part of the US, but it's thousands and thousands of miles away from California, but it's still part of America somehow. It's the biggest American military base in the Pacific. It's, you know, you see bombers every day. It's a great place to do aircraft watching. The gym I train at is called Spike 22. It's named after the Melchor Manabusan's dog, his pit bull that died. It's become quite a famous gym. At first they were training this group called Fokai that came out of there. And then the guys who were learning that, the mixed martial arts, they started applying it on the street. It got a bit of a bad reputation. And so they kind of separated a little bit, and other gyms have arisen from this Spike 22. It's now trained at by SWAT. The captain of the SWAT, the head of the SWAT team trains there. By Guam Police Department, you get police from immigration, police from customs, people from the CIA, you get people from the FBI, you get National Guard, Air Force, of course the indigenous Chamorro and some Filipino, Korean, and people from the Japanese diaspora, you know, these people that live on Guam. And you get the professional, foreign and local MMA fighters, wrestlers, and you get amateur and professional competitors and prize fighters who come in all the time. So it's constant flow of bodies coming through this gym. It's a busy, really busy gym. And in the morning at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whenever they get there, sometimes really early, you have this grey beard or old man jiu-jitsu. And that's what I've been doing. And it's very much like the kind of backyard training. Guam Police Department. I think this tells you everything. Yeah, it's kind of really deceptive, isn't it? You know, a lovely picture of the palm tree and the boat and the beach, and then GPD, I'd rather be choking you out, yeah, than on the beach. And here's some pictures of jiu-jitsu. And, you know, the becoming animal thing, I sort of flirted with using it for this as well. And Dan showed me a move, and he talks about, I move my whole body like a snake, and they use snake as a verb, snake tin, snake to cross, and talk about turtles and dogs and stuff. But really, it doesn't kind of make much interest in me, to be honest, talking about becoming animal in jiu-jitsu when 5 murderers have trained at Spike. You know, when people tell you stuff like that, you start thinking, okay, so what am I going to do with this? So, I'll get to that in a minute. So Cauliflower Culture is the name of the brand that they're promoting at Spike 22 right now. And if you use Twitter or you're on Facebook, you can look at Cauliflower Culture and that'll come up. It's really a fighter's thing. Cauliflower ear is one of the perils of proximity. Basically, you get these big, lumpy, massive cauliflower ears. If you're not injured after 1 year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're dead. Basically, there's all these brands that are emerging, Fokai, Purebred, Cauliflower Culture, and to some degree it is some kind of celebration of violence and some celebration of masculinity. But there is a logic of submission that's built into it, because you can tap out in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You know, if someone puts you in a lock and they choke you out, you can tap out. And then by tapping, they should let you go, you know? I mean, this is training Spike. This guy here is, wow. There's Manny Chong on top there. Manny Chong gets hold of you. Oh my God, it's hard to get him off. He's a professional MMA fighter. He's also a policeman. Brilliant person to train with, really generous and teach you many different things, you know. And the PCS, position, control, submission, is what Jiu-Jitsu is about. Getting position, and then you can take control, and then you submit the person. And you work for each one. It can take time. This is a rear naked choke. See some females training as well. And just train with the guys. Now, this idea of habitus from Waquan, I don't know, I'm kind of uneasy with it in some ways. with Levi Strauss and The Way of the Mask, this book really influenced me. And he talks about how transformation sets occur with masks. Like you'll find one tribe will have one myth and another tribe will have another myth that's kind of opposite, but they'll have the same mask. Or you'll have two tribes where a mask is, you have one mask with big lips and a big nose and big eyes, and another mask where everything's been inverted, and yet the myth stays the same. So the myth stays the same and the masks are different, or the mask stays the same and the myth's inverted. That's the transformation set. So this idea really interested me, and I'm going to look at that in a minute with Shunga and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And of course, there's some terms that come up with ethnography. You've always got to be really listening to what people are saying. I really think it's very similar to psychoanalysis in some ways, because it really is the art of listening. You just have to sit there and just listen to what they say. I don't even like asking questions. I hardly ever ask questions in my research. I just listen to what people say and just let them tell me. Sooner or later they will. There's a chapter in Fighting Scholars by Brian Hugiven on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was quite interesting because he talks about habit rather than habitus. And of course, this idea of habitus comes from hexis, from Bourdieu, where habitus was supposed to be embodied hexis. But I think Waquant does a fairly good job of dismissing that. And to be honest with you, it just ends up with being this word salad of theory, you know? And I just get to the point where, is this really useful? You know, is this helping us? I don't think so. I think it's putting the ethnographic cart before the horse. It's really more important just to do the study on the ground and see what comes out from them. And then you can mess about with transformation sets. So, yeah. Check it out. You know? Yeah, there's a PhD ready to be done there. Somebody could do that, you know? Yeah. Homicide. I don't see ankle locks or arm bars as that dangerous. It's going to be strictly chokeholds. This is the GPD person assigned to me. The Guam Police Department very kindly assigned a investigator to me to help me to do my research, which is really interesting because I managed to get the records from the police department from people who've been killed with rear naked chokes, and I could look through the autopsy. Carl Gargarita killed Anthony Girilau on the June the 14th, 2013 using a rear naked choke. Apparently the guy tapped out, but he didn't stop because even though he was tapping, he thought it wasn't safe to let him go, so he ended up killing him. Eric Garner, as we know, was killed on July 17th, 2014 by New York PD, NYPD, using a rear naked choke, and it's very famous, I can't breathe. You must have all seen that as a kind of protest. And so homicide and rear naked chokes seem to be a really interesting thing to research from Spike. And here's the perpetrator of the crime showing the rear naked choke on how he applied it on a prosecutor, on an attorney. So, okay, so I've got these three areas, all right, right now. Something I'm finishing, something I'm in the middle of, something I'm maybe about to begin. But at the same time, it seems in anthropology there's a paradigm shift occurring with the work of Ingold. On the one side, he's challenging agency and throwing that out with the idea of animacy, that it's not looking at some kind of agent that's embodied in some flesh, but actually it's about how things work in terms of life and how things work in terms of the environment. That we shouldn't be talking about how embodiment and being stuck in bodies, but we should be talking about movement. For my part, we shouldn't be talking about technology so much in martial arts studies, but about performance. We're not talking about interacting or how people are, or interaction. We've moved on. We're talking about correspondence, how we correspond with not even informants anymore, interlocutors. The whole language of anthropology has changed. You know? It reinvents itself every 10 years. Instead of talking about representation or to represent people, we're talking about making. Instead of talking about studying of, we're talking about studying with. So anthropology then, it's shifted, it's changed, it's dynamic. And one of the things I want to emphasize about martial arts studies, because it's so interdisciplinary, and we've got all kinds of perspectives that have come into it, from cultural studies, from sociology, from anthropology, from history, from literature, you name it, theatre, all right? The thing is, we have to keep up to date with what's happening in each other's disciplines. We can't afford to slip. And that's, I think, one of the things with martial arts studies that we can excel at, is by being right up to date theoretically with all of the disciplines and then applying that to our particular set of studies. So in conclusion, I just want to say this, that anthropology has to move beyond endless discussions of embodiment, agency, habitus, and things as materials. It's 1990s. You just got to get over it. What I'm going to say to you is that these are emic and not necessarily etic attributions. Okay, it's an attribution. Agency is an attribution to some extent, but if you've had your agency taken away from you, you start thinking, well, maybe this isn't an attribution at all, you know? So it gets kind of complex because there's more than one way to define this. I think one way out of it is to renew a focus on efficacy and entertainment. We have to look at the emergence of cultural practice via fine-grained ethnographic attention with community participation. So I really think that these particular studies, rather than say, oh, they've all been done or we've done enough of them, no. I really think we have to continue doing them because as the environments keep changing, people keep changing, the community's changing, you know? And so if we're going to have a lens on this at all, then we need to continue these studies and not say, oh, forget about ethnography. Let's not bother with ethnography anymore. And we need to attend to a practical and applied symbiosis. We have to gain, what I mean by that is like, it can be applied, you know, like you can gain access to the police, maybe to help to solve cold cases, or maybe you could get access to it to maybe help to solve injustice that's also been perpetrated by the police on the other side of it. Right? So there needs to be some kind of application of martial arts studies. We're not just doing it for entertainment. We're not just doing it for the sake of it. You know, it's not just waffling theory, but there has to be some kind of practical purpose behind the studies that we're doing. You know, what are we doing this for? Okay, so that's my talk.